Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video of our new game that we're working on. Basically, I got another developer and I, just two people, it's a two-man project, working on this game. So far, for the time being, the game is called Infected, and I'm just going to go over basically what we've done so far and how we got here. So, a little background on us. We are both computer technicians who pretty much decided that we don't want to be computer technicians for the rest of our lives, and we want to become game developers. It's something we've always wanted to do, but for the first time in our lives, we're actually taking steps to get there. So we're starting off with a simple game, which is why we're going with the 2D route and pixel art, and we're going to slowly evolve it, and once it's finished, we're going to eventually create a 3D version of this exact game, and a bunch of other games along with it that we're going to release for multiple platforms, console, PC, and mobile. But we want to start very, very simple, which is what I recommend for anyone starting off in the video game industry. Another background for you guys, a little bit more on that, is we didn't really know where to start. Just like many of you, we didn't know what game engine we wanted to use, whether or not we wanted to create our own and just use a game framework, or what. So it took a lot of time and decision making between both of us going back and forth to decide exactly what we wanted to do. Eventually, we ended up on using C# as our programming language of choice, and we were down to two ways to create our games. We had the monogame framework, which still required us to create our own engine, but it still was somewhat easy, but it gives us full control on everything. And then of course we have Unity, which also allows C# programming for all the scripting of the game, and yeah, and it's a full-based engine, so you don't have to code your own. It has animation support, particles, physics, all of that. So, audio. So we decided, you know what? We're going to be working with Unity in the future anyway. Might as well start now. So that's what we did. So we're learning C# and we're learning Unity at the same time. Which may or may not be the best way to go, as some people recommend learning, C# first and become really proficient with it before moving on to Unity. But because Unity has a lot of its own specific commands within the C# environment and mono develop and mono game world, actually not mono game, sorry, mono develop world, we wanted to just go ahead and just learn both at the same time, and then learn C# on the side to complement our knowledge. So, all right, moving on. So what I've created so far, as you see here on the screen, is just some placeholder art for our game. This is not, and I repeat, this was not the final artwork for the game, as it's definitely going to change. This is just placeholder art for the time being. And I'm going to go over exactly what I've done here so far. So I've added a few sprites to the screen, two of which have collision detection. The character and this cone, which doesn't necessarily look like a cone per se, but yeah, I'll change that later. Okay, anywho, the game mechanics works like this. You're going to have your main character controlled with the WSAD keys for up and down movement. And then your mouse is actually going to act as a target reticle for your interaction with the enemies, which are going to be zombies. So as wherever you move the mouse, that's where your bullets are going to go. Simple enough. Okay, left click would be firing upon the enemy, and right click would be melee attack. To pick up the items, you simply walk over them. All right, so let's go over some of the things in the Unity environment that I had to learn the hard way. Okay, first off, pixel perfect rendering. So when you're importing, if I go to here to sprites, my sprites folder, and I got my character, you have to import them in a special way. Otherwise, they look like shit. Maybe I should censor that. Look like crap, whatever. Anyway, let me explain what I'm talking about here. So texture type, you want to make sure sprite, simple enough. Pixels to unit, you want to make sure this is 100, okay? Very important. So you're getting 100% of the pixels on the screen, okay? Next thing, filter mode. This can be, you have to make sure it's point, because if you make it anything else, look what happens. It looks all blurry. So point, pixel perfect, there you go, that's what you're looking for. All right, next thing, size. Now at the moment, this is just a single sprite, but when I have animations, this is gonna be, instead of single, it's gonna be multiple, because it's gonna import all of them in the sprite sheet. That's how I'm gonna animate this character. All right, so when we get to that point, I will change this to multiple. So something to keep that in mind. All right, so because at the moment, however, this is a single sprite, max size is gonna be 32 by 32, because this is actually, as far as the dimensions of this character, it's going to be, I believe, 32 by 16 for for this individual sprite. So the highest resolution that it goes to, max size, is 32 pixels on the screen. Now, if you have a sprite sheet, let's go ahead and apply that. Okay, so now if you have a sprite sheet, for example, with all the animations of this character, you want to make sure that this max size encompasses the size of the sprite sheet. So if the sprite sheet is 2048 by 2048, you'll want to change this to 2048 or 256 or whatever, respectively. Okay, very important. As for format, you can use true color or 16-bit to change the pixels themselves and how they look. Because I worked in true color in Photoshop, I'm going to use true color. Just because that looks a little bit more what I intended it to look like. But you can change between the two fairly easily. All right, so next thing to note. Now these various items on the screen, the med pack, the ammo, and the gun have no collision detection. They've just been imported in with the proper settings, and that's it. Now the player and the cone, however, have been extensively modified. So if you look in player, you'll see there's a drop-down menu. First thing you'll notice is the main camera is attached to the player. So that wherever the player goes, the camera is going to follow. That way the player is not just flying off screen and you having no idea where he went. So that's simple enough. You simply drag the camera onto the player object. Done. All right, the next thing you're going to notice is that there's two scripts on here. You have player controller and collision script. Now these two scripts are in my scripts folder, and I'm going to go over them with you real quick so you understand what's going on. But before I do that, I'm going to go over player right now, and I'm going to show you everything I have on him. So one, he has a rigid body, 2D. Make sure it's 2D if you're working with a 2D game. And you want to make sure it's fixed angle. It's checked. So that way, if for whatever reason anything bumps you or hits you, he's not going to rotate or fall flat. Because this is still a 3D engine. It's just basically in a 2D mode. So keep that in mind. You want to click fixed angle. Next, for interpolate, you want to make sure interpolate is selected. All right. And that's it for the rigid body. Now, you also want to make sure there's a box collider on them. So I have a box collider, and I basically didn't change anything as far as the dimensions go. It was perfect just the way it was, so I left that alone. So now we're getting into the code. So first thing you'll see is the first script I should say that you'll see is player controller. So I will get into that. So I'm gonna launch model develop here. All right, so here we go. So here's my player controller. It took me forever to figure out how this works and how to actually write it correctly, just for very simple basic controls, which I will change once there's animations onto the character. So this is what I got so far. Okay, so first off, we are working in 2 dimensions, not 3, so we're using vector 2. Okay, something to note: if you are working in 3-dimensional space, you want to use vector 3. Simple enough. Max speed for the character, whether he's moving on the x-axis or y-axis, is going to be 5, which of course this is editable because it's public, so it's going to be visible in the game, so you can manipulate that later if you want and change it at will without having to go back into your code. Very important. Okay, then you want to save this information into memory, so you go to private vector 2 and movement. So now vector 2 is attached to the movement of the character, and that's saved to memory. For starting, this just initializes the code. We don't have anything here right now because we don't need to, so that is okay. I'm going to move on to void update. Now this updates everything that is currently on this screen. So float, obviously, if you learn anything about C#, you know this is a floating point integer value, so you can have decimals in it. So you can have like 5.8 or 0.0 something. So that's just a floating point number. So this is going to calculate that. So it's going to calculate the input for x, get axis horizontal and get axis vertical. And you want to input x and input y. These are both float numbers you want to store and gather. Movement equals new vector 2. Like I said here, assign this vector to movement, which is already here, times speed. And speed, as you see here, we have the speed variable created. And this would input it times the input x and input y for speed in the x direction and speed in the y direction. So 5 and 5, it's x and y. So that should be simple enough to figure out. And then we have this, which is very, very important, especially for collision detection, guys. Void fix update rigid body 2D. Now you want to make sure that your rigid body has a 2D portion of it. Otherwise, it's just going to assume you're working in 3-dimensional space. Velocity equals movement. And now we're back full circle to the movement being 5, 5. So that's very, very important, guys. You got to have that, all right? Otherwise, if you don't have this rigid body code attached to the controller of at least one of these two objects, they're going to slide right in between each other. They're going to go right through each other. So although this one only has a box collider, one of the two objects that collides with each other has to have a rigid body component. So because our character has a rigid body component, I made sure that the code here reflected that respectively in the player controller for this particular object. So without this, they would pass right through each other. Keep that in mind, okay? And that all is controlled by the player controller. All right, so now that I've showed you the player controller script, I'm now going to show you the collision script, because if you click on my character, you can see there's a second script, collision. All right, so let me go ahead and double click on that so you know what that looks like. Here we go. And this is my collision script. Now this is very important when you're working in 2D space and you're working with collisions, is that on collision enter, and these are states that exist in 3D as well, but you got to make sure you add the 2D at the end of your function and at the when you declare it here. So you see there's collision 2D. If you just put collision, it's going to assume again you're working in 3D. So you always have to make sure it's got the 2D on both portions of your function here or your method. Okay, now mine don't really do anything on collision. It's just going to output a debug log so that I can see what's going on in the console here. So that just means that it's working. That's all I wanted to make sure was that it was working. So I'm going to debug log collision event, so then when he hits this object, it's going to send this collision event to the console. If he stays on it, so he's hits it and he doesn't move, it's going to say collision stay event. And then of course, and this can change in the future. So like say if it's lava or fire and he's staying in it, obviously he's going to continue to do more damage. So that's why I have these different methods or functions, okay? So, and then I have this one, when he leaves the object, so after he collides with it, now he's walking away from it, or he moves away from the object, it's going to say collision exit. It's going to output all of these to the console so that we can see them as he's continually, impacting and moving away from the object. So that is all that my collision code is, okay? Very, very, very easy, very simple code. And I also have this attached to the player, okay? Not the actual items in the world. You want to make sure that both of these scripts are attached to your player object. All right, so now that I got that, let me go to the cone here, which only has one thing added to it compared to the rest of these sprites, and that is a box collider 2D. Now when you add a box collider, you got to make sure it's the 2D version, because you'll see you've got to go game object, create other, component, physics 2D, you got box collider 2D, and then you've got rigid body 2D, and you've got all these other things, okay? But if you go to physics by themselves, you also see box collider, but it's not 2D. This is physics here by itself is going to be for 3-dimensional space. Physics 2D is going to be for 2-dimensional space, all right? So that should be simple enough. And then I have replicate, which I won't get into. This is the script that I'm experimenting with. That's basically going to make it so in the future, I don't have to have this really large sprite for the world that's 512 by 512. It can just be a small itty bitty chunk, okay, like a 8 by 8 or a 16 by 16 pixel that I just replicate and have it fill up the entire world. If I wanted to create a massive world. So I'm just experimenting with this replicate code, which is why I won't get into that one right now, because I'm not using it at the moment. All right, so let me go ahead and just click play so you can see what this game looks like. As you can see, the mouse is a target reticle. Now I can change this really easily in the project settings, which I'll show you guys in a little bit here. But at the moment, when you use the WSAD keys, you'll see the character moves up, down, left, and right. And he can go right through the gun, right through the ammo pack, and right through the med kit. However, he cannot go right through, oh, whoops, he can. What did I change? I changed something. Let me take a look here. What did I change? I changed something. Crap, what did I change? This was working a second ago. What did I do? All right, guys, I'm going to pause the video for a second until I figure this out, and then I will resume. All right, guys, welcome back. So I figured out what was wrong. Basically, in my player here, I checked it is kinematic. You want to uncheck that. Okay, so it's really that simple. In the 2D rigid body controller for the character. Okay, so yeah, so that's the one thing you want to change. So I'm gonna hit save scene, save project. Actually, was it kinematic or is it interpolate? Which one was it? It's unchecked kinematic. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, sorry, not kinematic. You want to uncheck kinematic, and that's all you want to do. So you want to make sure that's its kinematic is not checked, and you want to make sure that interpolate is enabled, and that's simple. So let's go ahead and play it. As you can see here, it hits the object, the cone, and it does not go through it. So that's simple enough. Okay. So we got collision detection. Next thing you'll see is that the mouse here is actually going to be the target reticle, and it's going to be what we're going to use to, target our zombies on the screen. So how I did that is going to be really simple. I'm going to show you here in just a second. So if you go to build settings, I got it on PC, Mac, Linux, standalone. Go to player settings. Aha, and look at this default cursor. You can actually select which sprite you want to use for that. Okay, so that's pretty basic, but you want to make sure, you have to make sure that when you import that particular sprite, so if we go back to our assets folder and go to sprites, and this one right here, target reticle, you change the texture type to cursor. Because if you leave it on sprite 2D, it simply will be a black square when you're playing the game. So you want to make sure that's on cursor, wrap mode is clamp, and filter type point. That way it's pixel perfect as well. 32 and 16-bit or true color, whatever you prefer. And that's that. Okay, guys, so that's how you do that. So when you click play, boom, we have our target reticle, and it looks exactly like we wanted it to look like. We've got our collision detection now, so that we can start building the world environment. And next step, hopefully by the end of the day, I'm going to create a new sprite for the main character and have animation support, so that way when he's moving in different directions, he has animation to go correspond with that. And then I will be very satisfied with my work so far on day 2. This is only day 2 of me creating this game, by the way, guys. Yesterday I created everything that you see. Today I created the collision detection between the player and other objects in the game world. All right, and hopefully by tomorrow I should have animations for the main character as he moves around the environment. And maybe if that's simple enough to do, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can have item pickups. So when he runs over a gun or runs over ammo or whatever, he starts picking those items up. But I might save that for day 3 or 4, so we'll see. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it was very informative and saves a lot of you guys a lot of grief when it comes to working with Unity and 2D graphics, especially pixel art when you're dealing with pixel perfect precision. Excuse me. Yeah, hope you guys learned a lot. You can always pause the video on my code if you want to copy my code. I really don't mind. It's there for learning purposes anyway. So the finished game, of course, I won't make the source code public. However, the game is going to be completely free of charge when the game is released, at least for the beta and alpha versions. Once it's fully polished and finished off, I will charge for it, more than likely, but that's because I like the I'd rather pay for a video game, 99 cents or $1 or whatever, versus having stupid ads displayed everywhere. And I know the developers always need to make money. That's how that's how they make money. That's how they put food on the table. So I understand that they have to have some way of making money if they're going to release the game for free. But the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to upfront just charge people $1 or $2, not a whole lot of money, obviously, since this is our first game for the game. So I'm thinking probably just 99 cents for the game itself. So that's just something to keep in mind, guys. And this is video 1 in the series that I'm going to be creating for this game. So you guys can definitely follow along. I encourage you to do so. Definitely rank, comment, subscribe to our channel. And since this is the first video and I'm one of the developers, this is on my private YouTube channel at the moment, but I'm going to release this video on our actual game development channel once we have a studio name and a website up. So for right now, it's just going to be on here on my private channel. All right, guys, I will see you guys later in the next video. Enjoy.